I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what's going to happen to our government and our system. I think that we are moving towards a breaking point. I do believe that. But in the meantime, I believe that we can actually change things in our local levels. I've been on several times in the last 5 years with you, and I've always said that globalism is the problem and localism is the solution. I totally applaud what Secretary Kennedy is doing and how he's trying to help us, but he can't save us on his own. What we can do, however, is to work in our localities, in our states, and our local communities to push back.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health. And now here is our host and producer, Hilda Labrada Gore.
Hey, Hilda here. In April 2025, the Idaho Medical Freedom Act was passed. Our guest today crafted the legislation and lobbied to get it passed to protect residents of Idaho from being fired, excluded, or discriminated against for not taking or using a medical intervention. Could you pass something similar wherever you live? What can you do to preserve medical freedom and autonomy for you and your community? This is episode 546, and our guest today is Leslie Manookian. Leslie is the founder and president of the Health Freedom Defense Fund. We held this conversation in front of members of the Weston A. Price Foundation in a Zoom meeting, and Leslie gave us the backstory on what motivated her in the first place to help her fellow Idaho residents. She worked hard to get it passed, though she faced many hurdles, and today she talks about how big tech has been implicated in the suppression of our freedom and why it is so important to work locally to create change globally. We need to resist big tech, big pharma, and overreach from the government. Before we get into the conversation, would you like to watch a Wise Traditions podcast interview live? Like I said, we conducted this exclusive podcast interview in front of members who are invited to attend, and we do this about every other month. And members also get to pose their own questions once we turn the microphones off. It's a lovely perk of membership, so join us today. Go to westonaprice.org and click on the Become a Member button. It's only $30 when you use the code POD10. Again, go to westonaprice.org and join today. It's only $30 for the entire year. And use the code POD10 to save $10 off. Your membership supports our important work of education, research, and activism. And thank you in advance. Welcome to the Wise Traditions family. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Leslie.
So great to be with you, Hilda.
In April, the Idaho Medical Freedom Act passed. I understand that you wrote that legislation. What gave you the idea of a Medical Freedom Act?
The last 5 years. Actually, it's much longer than the last 5 years. As most people who are Weston Price followers know, I started learning about homeopathy about 25 years ago, and that's where I heard about the vaccine debate. I didn't even know there was a vaccine debate. I was getting flu vaccines into my 30s, and I was getting sicker and sicker and didn't realize why, and I'd had all these issues. And then I ended up making an award-winning documentary on vaccines called The Greater Good. And that impressed upon me the importance of medical freedom. And I watched as medical freedoms were being removed across the country in California, New York, Maine, Connecticut. It's just incredible what's happened in the last 15 years. And I also watched how I was just utterly silenced by the tech giants during this same period. And then, of course, 2020 unfolded. And from the very beginning of 2020, I knew exactly what was going on because I'd been studying the legislation put in place, all the different pieces of the puzzle necessary to facilitate an authoritarian response to a public health crisis. And so I did not believe that this was really about a public health issue, rather that it was the furtherance of an agenda. And I founded Health Freedom Defense Fund in order to fight back. And we've sued the federal government 4 or 5 times now. And we've sued Nike and Disney and the University of Chicago and so many different groups. Yeah, we haven't lost against the federal government. We haven't won every case, but we've either settled or they were dismissed because the emergency ended to moot the case or because another very similar case won. So like we literally have not lost against them. And then of course we have this huge case against the Los Angeles Unified School District, which seeks to halt the use of Jacobson versus Massachusetts as a justification, a lawsuit from 1905, to justify vaccine mandates nationwide. And the reason I'm sharing all this is because I watched in horror as my beloved Idaho just descended into medical tyranny in the last 5 years. But it was built on 20 years of research prior to that. And so I really understood what was going on. I was terrified about what was going on and what the end result was going to be. And what happened was under COVID, all these people, legislators that I've been speaking to for years and years, literally, I've been going to Boise and testifying for more than 15 years, pushing back against extensions of the state, essentially. After COVID and all of the authoritarian responses, the legislature really woke up and listened. And so last summer, I thought, you know what? Now is the time. If we're ever going to get something like this passed, now is the time. One of my colleagues here in Idaho connected me with a senator, and I told him what my idea was. And he said, I love it. I think it's a great idea. Write the bill, and if I like it, I will sponsor it. And so that's
Pause for a second, because this is just so nutrient dense, for lack of a better word. There's so much information here. And there may be someone listening right now, Leslie, even though we're doing this as a members only initial podcast recording live in front of some of our members, there are people who are going to listen to this later and they'll be like, wait a minute. She mentioned big tech. I could expect big pharma to be fighting for these medical mandates, but not big tech. What role do they play? And you mentioned them in passing, but I'm curious, what role did they play in moving forward with this kind of infringement on our autonomy?
Yeah. Well, first of all, big tech already back in 2013, 2012 was censoring me. Twitter, Facebook, all these guys, they were suppressing us. YouTube has completely deleted my channel.
What?
And I can't get it back. They've taken all my content. Yeah. And Twitter reinstated me after Elon Musk bought it, but I'm so unbelievably shadow banned. I only have like 5,000 followers. It's ridiculous. And it's taken me so much to get there. You can't imagine.
Didn't Mark Zuckerberg say, though, that like his back was against the wall? I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but like, wasn't he brought in front of legislators and he was like, oh, it's because they were pressuring us. The government was pressuring us. He was saying basically that his arm was twisted and that's why they were censoring, to try to keep the disinformation at a distance.
Well, first of all, there are two pieces here. One is that this began back in 2012, 2013. The Greater Good, our movie Facebook page, had, I forget how many tens of thousands of subscribers or followers. We were getting 300,000 at least a week back then, over 1 million a month, which was huge back then. And then all of a sudden it just went to like 3,000 a month. Okay. So this is before anybody was talking about tech censorship. I'm talking, 12, 13 years ago. Yeah. And then people may remember that in 2019, the World Health Organization issued a list of the top 10 threats to global health. And on that list was vaccine hesitancy. Yes, anyone who questions the safety or efficacy of vaccines is one of the top 10 threats to global health. Amazing. Congressman Adam Schiff, in response to that, supposedly in response, I'm sure it was all orchestrated, wrote a letter to Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, and I forget who was his, was it Larry Page? His partner, basically Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everybody, and said, please take down any content that conflicts with CDC's utterings. And literally, Congressman Schiff wrote to them and asked them to censor us. And you know what they did? Amazon removed my movie from where it had been on the premium free streaming service. So on their, Prime platform. It had been there for 4 years about, and they just took it down.
Wow.
And they took down books. They took down everything. So my point is, big tech has been playing a role going way, way back. It didn't start in 2020. And then, of course, during 2020, they caved, if you want to call it that. I don't think they were caving. Let's not forget that Facebook actually was begun in the kind of think tank and investment I can't think of the term for it now. It's like, it's an incubator, right? A tech incubator called InQtel. The federal government played a role in that. The federal government's played a role in many of these different platforms. Google, they co-developed it. Like, this is not a secret. And so my point is, are they really private, or are they an extension of the state? And did they have their arms twisted, or did they voluntarily comply? And let's not forget that Google has actually invested in pharmaceutical companies. They're actually a pharmaceutical owner now. They have a vested interest in this. They have been manipulating the public through their search engine and other tools for many, many years. Facebook's doing the same thing. So my point is, big tech is the tool by which they have been engineering thought, beliefs, public opinion, and then controlling it. And it's the tool through which they're going to install the digital control grid to control us and implement a sort of social credit score a la China, right? So this is why big tech is so important, because it's being used against us in so many ways. And so as I watched that, I was actually writing articles already in March, trying to alert people. But, my footprint was so small because I've been so crushed. I wrote an article about the slow march to authoritarianism in March of 2020.
Oh,
talking about this stuff because I knew
early.
it was happening. And, I was just quashed.
Yes. Well, between big tech, big pharma, and, government and the World Health Organization, like all of these forces, it seems, are like a huge Goliath. And yet, as you've pointed out, your Health Freedom Defense Fund and other groups, of course, have found ways to be the David and fight them. Like wasn't it your group that was behind the removal of the mask mandate, quote unquote, on flights and so forth?
Absolutely. When CDC issued their federal travel mask mandate, Health Freedom Defense Fund sued and won. And people will remember in April of 2020 when that was announced, and people mid-flight were like ripping off their masks, and the flight attendants were singing and celebrating. It was like amazing. So
But
that was
it couldn't have been April 2020 because that was too soon into the pandemic.
2022.
It must have been
my mistake if I said 2020. We won.
That's okay.
April 18th of 2022 was when the ruling was issued. Yeah.
Because I would have been ready to celebrate so much earlier. Actually, I was. And this leads us into questions about personal autonomy, because though there were mandates, as you and I both know, that doesn't mean it always has a foothold, and it's not law, right? It's not law. So it's important to know that distinction. And let's talk about that a little bit before we get into, again, the Idaho Medical Freedom Act.
Yeah. And Hilda, let me just say, that's why you can't let the tech people off the hook. They might have had their arm twisted, but I don't think that's what was happening. They were working together with them, let's be honest. And even if CDC was twisting their arms, they should have been blowing the whistle, not complying. That's what a patriot would have done. That's what someone who believes in the Constitution would have done. That's what someone who is an honest actor would have done. They would have said, hey, we're being forced, coerced, pressured. This is outrageous. This is appalling, and we won't stand for it. And what did they do? Nothing. So I don't give them a free ride in any way. And all of this stuff, all the tech stuff, and then all of the legislation that's been put in place in the last 20 years truly facilitated this overreach in 2020. And as I watched that unfold and literally destroy my beloved Idaho, last year I thought, I've got to do something about this. And so I wrote that bill, and we got a sponsor. And, I just believed. And I really, it's unbelievable that it happened, but,
It is. And so I know that the wheels of justice, as they say, turn slowly, and even the wheels in government trying to bring a bill up, and then it gets squashed, and then you got to try it again in the next session and so forth. Like, how much work went into the lobbying for it, even though you did have this advocate and sponsor for it?
Mm-hmm. Well, lobbying, we don't have any lobbyists. There are no lobbyists. We just have mothers and fathers, concerned Idahoans. And then we have the support of so many organizations like Stand for Health Freedom, who are sending out messages for us, and Heritage Action and the Weston Price Foundation, right? They were sending out messages to all of their members in the state of Idaho, and the governor and the legislators were bombarded with thousands and thousands of phone calls and emails and texts and messages. And that played a huge role, but another big piece was, I think, two things. One is the governor shot himself in the foot so badly, and I'll go into that in a few minutes. But the biggest issue is that while I had been working for, since they in Idaho, they tried to extend the vaccine registry to every adult in 2010 after the 2009 swine flu hoax. And I call it a hoax because it really truly was. It was such a farce and such exaggeration. But it was a way to get billions of dollars to the health departments to do their bidding. The CDC funneled all this money to them. I think it was like nearly $7 billion. I actually went and organized Idahoans, and we pushed back, and we killed the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare's effort to extend the immunization registry it's the vaccine registry, to every person in the state of Idaho, because they wanted to extend it from children to adults, because they had been unlawfully, secretly enrolling Idaho adults who took the swine flu vaccine without their knowledge or consent. And so my point is, I had a track record over there. I'd been talking to them about this for a long time. Then in 2016, the Health Freedom Idaho was founded, which is a grassroots group who are my unbelievable sisters in this health freedom work. Misty Carlfeld and Sarah Clendenin are the two executive directors. And I'm a founding board member, and they are closer to Boise than I am. They live there, whereas I'm 3 hours away. And so they've been on the ground doing a lot of work for 10 years. And so what happened was in 2020 is that all of a sudden we have been going and speaking and testifying and getting people. So back in 2010, we had 200 people call the legislature or email the legislature. And I remember the Senate told me they had never seen anything like it. They had never had more pushback. And the senator called me at like 11 o'clock one night and said, you've won. I'm going to put the bill in the drawer.
Oh.
So my point is, we've been educating them for all this time, Hilda. And then by the time 2020 came and they watched what was happening, they kind of had a reference point.
I would say so. So let's talk about the crux of the Idaho Medical Freedom Act. When you wrote that legislation, was it simply to protect people from mandated medical interventions, or was it broader than that?
It was much broader. It was to ensure that the COVID response or a COVID-type response never happens again in the state of Idaho. And so there had been a bill passed in 2023 called the Coronavirus Stop Act, and it prohibited any business, private business, public state agency, or educational institution from mandating a COVID shot. And I thought, well, that's great, but isn't the real issue here not the COVID shot, but the most basic and fundamental of all rights, and that is medical autonomy, bodily autonomy? Isn't that really the most important thing here? And why should we be somehow singling out the COVID shot as though it's, a one-off? Who in their right mind claims the moral authority to dictate to me what I do with my body? And so I thought, what if I take this at this time now when all the legislators are awake to what's happened in the last 20 years or in the last 5 years, and extend it? And so I took that bill and I started thinking about how to make this something that could apply to every instance imaginable and to every potential infringement of our rights, and how to make it so comprehensive that it would prohibit everything. And so I took the coronavirus vaccine and I expanded it to medical intervention. And I can tell you what the exact language is because I think it's quite compelling. Medical intervention means a medical procedure, treatment, device, drug, injection, medication, or medical action taken to diagnose, prevent, or cure a disease or alter the health or biological function of a person. So, Hilda, think about that.
Yeah.
It means no swabs being shoved up your nose in order to live a normal life, enter a business, go to work, testify at the legislature. It means no masks. It means no vaccines. It means no one can force a pill, ADHD medications on your children. It means no one can say that you have to have a glucose monitor inserted under your skin or a chip or any kind of device. So we're talking like anything.
And this is really important because I'm thinking, Leslie, there have been initiatives to, for example, aerosolize vaccines. So if I'm reading your legislation correctly, that would be also impossible or illegal if they tried to do that.
It's a medication, right?
And it's to prevent something ostensibly. You know what? It's supposed to prevent vaccine hesitancy. You don't want a vaccine? That's okay. We'll put it in your lettuce or we'll put it in the air.
Yeah.
I think there have been movements in that direction.
Yeah. Well, it's not supposed to prevent it. It's supposed to override it, right? I mean, in like vaccine hesitancy, what a farce. I mean, that term is so ridiculous.
I know.
The point is that I wanted to make this as all-encompassing as possible in order to safeguard Idahoans against it happening again.
Coming up, Leslie enumerates exemptions to the Idaho Medical Freedom Act. She also describes the numerous hurdles that she encountered as she worked to get this legislation passed.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Optimal carnivore. Organ meats are some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, but they can be difficult to find or source, high-quality organ meats, that is, and tricky to prepare so that everyone enjoys them. So the guys over at Optimal Carnivore decided to do something about this. They started sourcing 100% grass-fed organ meats from New Zealand, freeze-drying the organs, and encapsulating them into convenient bovine gelatin capsules. Their products are 100% grass-fed and grass-finished and free of hormones, pesticides, antibiotics, and GMOs. And since our ancestors would have eaten the whole animal, they've created this unique blend of 9 different organs in their grass-fed organ complex. It's a powerful combination that includes beef liver, brain, thymus, heart, kidney, spleen, pancreas, lung, and gallbladder. And each organ contains its own unique benefits and nutritional profile. And none of their goodness is lost because Optimal Carnivore gently freeze-dries the organs, which preserves all of the vitamins, minerals, proteins, and enzymes. These products are perfect for people who are traveling or still trying to develop an appreciation for organ meats. Also plants one tree for every product sold, which helps the environment. So they have their grass-fed organ complex, a grass-fed bone marrow, a grass-fed liver, and a brain-nourished product. Go to Amazon.com/optimalcarnivore, check out their wide variety of offerings today, and use the code WESTON10 to save 10% on all products. Again, that's Amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and the code WESTON10 to save 10% on all products. And American Blossom Linens. Sleep soundly and wake refreshed. Experience the soft, crisp quality of the American Blossom Linens heirloom, chemical-free bedding. It's made completely in the U.S., just like the sheets your grandma had. And American Blossom Linens is made by Thomaston Mills, a family-owned bedding company, bedding manufacturer, making products since 1899. Their cotton is grown in the U.S., then it's spun, woven, finished, sewn, and packaged right here by your friends and neighbors. Check out their sheets, towels, blankets, quilts, pillows, duvets, duvet inserts, baby blankets, and crib sheets, all made in the U.S. from cotton and wool, natural fibers that greatly enhance your sleep experience. Foreign sheets made of synthetic fibers and filled with chemicals, they travel over 8,000 miles to get to you, which is no good for you or the environment. With over 2,500 five-star reviews, their products are loved by many, including Angela and Shay from Homemaker Chic and Josh and Carolyn from Homesteading Family. You can get free shipping on everything, by the way. So order with confidence, knowing also that you'll have their 2-year happiness guarantee. If you are not happy with your purchase for any reason, simply return it for a full refund. Go to AmericanBlossomLinens.com and use the code word WISE for 20% off today. Again, that's AmericanBlossomLinens.com and the code word WISE for 20% off. This is Hilda Labrada Gore, and you're listening to Wise Traditions.
There's a couple of small exemptions. So one is anything that was deemed an occupational safety standard before COVID is exempted, meaning that if you work in an industry, so if you work at Micron, one of the biggest employers in the state of Idaho, and you're required to go into a clean room and wear some kind of like a clean suit, that's exempted for a good reason. Or if you work in some kind of a factory where there's a lot of dust and stuff, you could be required to wear a mask because that's a hazard going into your lungs. So those kinds of things are exempted. And the one thing that I'm frustrated about, but we will address going forward, is something that we had to do because of the Supreme Court case from 2022, which said that hospitals which receive Medicare funds, Medicare and Medicaid funds, can require the COVID shot. That was exempted in the Coronavirus Stop Act in 2023 because it was a federal, it's a lawsuit that was ruled on by the Supreme Court, and therefore it's binding on all states. And so if something was considered standard before 2020, then the hospitals can continue to implement those. If it was something that was new, they cannot do that. So I would like to get us to a place where no person in Idaho is subject to any kind of mandate in order to live a normal life, but we have a little bit of work to do on that one little aspect. And then there's some times where like a person goes and they work for an employer that sends them abroad. If a foreign jurisdiction requires a COVID shot, there's nothing we can do about that, right? We can't prohibit that. The person cannot go. They could, tell their employer, I'm not doing it, and they have the time to do that, but that's something. So what's important about this, Hilda, is that it means that no Idahoan, with very small exceptions, can be forced to submit to any kind of a medical intervention or use a medical intervention in order to live a normal life. You can't be required to do something in order to go into a business, to work for a business, to access their services, to use transportation, to exercise your civic rights and responsibilities, to get an education. Nothing can be conditioned on you using any medical intervention.
Which it's so exciting, and it does really lift up our autonomy. But I can't imagine, Leslie, that this was able to pass without a fight. What obstacles did you face?
Well, it was very interesting because the Idaho Education Association, which is the teachers union, and is a part of the National Education Association, which is the teachers union, they fought it. And they lied. They constantly lied or I shouldn't say they lied, but I mean, that's what they were doing. They were making stuff up. They were saying that this bill would prevent children from being sent home. That was a pure fabrication. That was not true at all. We didn't say anything about schools being prohibited from sending sick children home. In fact, it's already in statute, and we didn't touch that. Mm-hmm. But they were saying, well, what if a kid has pink eye? Can't they be forced to go and take antibiotics? And I would say, they can be sent home from school. They cannot be forced to take antibiotics. And then I would say, my own son had conjunctivitis and I cured him within 8 hours with homeopathy. There are lots of ways to treat our children and ourselves when we're ill. Drugs are not the only way. But so this is the kind of thing they said. They would say, what if someone has strep throat? Can't they be forced to take antibiotics? What if they started talking about super lice?
Oh, gosh.
I didn't even know super lice is a thing, but apparently lice are becoming resistant to all the medications used to try and kill them. And so they're becoming super lice. And I was just like, you can send them home, but you can't dictate the treatment. Mm-hmm. And so these people were trying to kind of really twist what the bill was about in order to just throw up obstacles. And then there was one guy, I think his name was Senator Furman. It was quite hilarious. He's like, why now? Why do you want to do this now? Isn't it unnecessary? COVID's behind us. And I was just like, no, this is exactly why we should do it now, because it's fresh in your minds. And to prevent against it ever happening again, we need to do this now, not in the future. So there were all these kinds of things. And then what ended up happening, Hilda, was quite extraordinary. The governor was kind of MIA for 3 days. So the bill was passed on a Wednesday, and the bill by the House, it made it through the Senate, it made it through the House. I actually presented the bill to both chambers, to the Senate State Affairs Committee and to the House Health and Welfare Committee. And that's a huge privilege and honor, right? To present your own bill and then stand for questions, because it's very rare for a private citizen to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I stood for questions and I was grilled, and it was actually really fun because I got to push back on so many of the assumptions and things they say. And then it passed both chambers. And I thought the bill was going to go to the governor's office on a Friday morning. Uh-huh. Well, it didn't make it to his office until the following Monday at 11:30 in the morning. And that's important because in Idaho, the governor, any bill that's passed by both chambers, there's 5 24-hour periods from the moment the governor reaches it or receives it at his desk to either sign it, veto it, or do nothing, after which it becomes law. So if he doesn't actively sign it or veto it within those 5 24-hour periods, 11:30 on Saturday morning, March 29th was the due date, then the bill would have automatically become law. Well, listen, he went home or something on the Wednesday of that week. He was nowhere to be seen on Thursday or Friday. And we're all wondering, like, where is he? What's going on? And he's not communicating with anybody about the bill. He's not expressing any concerns or reservation or anything. And like I said, I thought the bill was going to get to him the Friday before. Didn't get to him until Monday at 11:30, which was important because it meant that the deadline was Saturday at 11:30 when no one would be around, and after the session was supposed to end on Friday the 28th.
So what happened?
And so what ended up happening was I'm actually visiting my son in college, and I get a phone call from the senator who sponsored the bill initially. And he says the governor has vetoed the bill, but he's very, very nice. He totally supports it. And he's just concerned that sick kids can't be sent home. And I said, we didn't say anything about sick kids being sent home. That's already in statute. And this is what he said. And I was just like, really crestfallen. But I thought, that's easy to fix. We'll just address that and come back at him. And so the senator said, listen, we'll figure this out and I'll meet up with Senate leadership on Monday and then we will devise a plan. On Sunday, when we texted, he assured me that he would not move forward without my agreement on the language or consent to go forward with the bill. And the governor, when he vetoed the bill on Saturday morning, he issued a statement and put in writing that parents had the right to be able to be assured that their children were in a safe place and that sick kids could be sent home. And I'm like, you're just making this up. And the Educational Association is making this up. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was the senator, his name is Dan Foreman, he went in and he met with the governor's office on Monday morning, March 31st. And they cut some kind of a deal. And they said they brought a new bill that was my bill, but it carved out daycare, meaning all, 6-week-old babies to 3-year-old children could be required to get vaccinations if they were in private daycare. And I flipped. I heard about it at around 2:15 on that day, and I was just texting him like, no, this is evil. I will not purchase our freedoms off the backs of the health and welfare of our most innocent and vulnerable. Like, no, this is outrageous.
Yeah.
And he said, we don't have to go forward. And then he did it anyway. He went and introduced that bill without telling me.
The senator?
That senator in the Senate that afternoon, Senate Dan Foreman. And I was just like appalled. I couldn't believe it. I was utterly stunned. And then the people in the House, my bill sponsor in the House was a guy named Rob Beiswanger, who's just salt of the earth, amazing man, total hero. He and the House leadership, including Assistant Majority Leader Josh Tanner, they said, don't worry, we'll deal with this. And I'm like, how can we deal with this? So the House brought its own bill, which was my bill exactly, with just the insertion of language that this legislation is not intended to contravene existing statute regarding schools having the authority to send home sick kids. So it called the governor's bluff. Well, all week, it went back and forth. Our bill, we introduced the bill, it made it through on Tuesday afternoon through the House committee, then it passed it was heard on the floor of the House on Wednesday, and then, it's just like up and down, up and down. The Senate proceeded with their bill. The House bill made it through faster, and then the Senate said, we won't hear your bill. So like every half an hour, I was going from unbelievable elation to like, oh my gosh, it's all over. We're done. It was the biggest emotional roller coaster. I was working 18-hour days on the phone at 6 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, literally did not have a phone out of my hands as long as I was awake. It was just,
oh my goodness.
And then what ultimately happened was by Friday morning, I thought it was over and that we were going to have to agree to this kind of broken bill because the Senate wouldn't hear the House bill. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, I spoke with House leadership and they said, it's not over yet. What do you want to do? What do you need in order to make you happy? And I said, well, they can still, they can declare an emergency for anything. They can send home. There's no description or definition of disease outbreak. They can send home healthy kids when another kid has a runny nose, or when another kid has pink eye, or when another kid has any of these issues. And they said, okay, so what should we do? So we literally at 6:30 in the morning on the phone drafted a new paragraph which said that no healthy individual can be excluded in the event of a disease outbreak. Healthy, unhealthy,
Yeah, I'm trying to get that straight.
unvaccinated person, because it's all around vaccines, right? It's all about coercion and trying to force people to comply because their livelihood is threatened. Sending their kids to school or to daycare is threatened. So we basically inserted a paragraph that improved my original bill, and I didn't ever think was possible, but at the 11th hour it was. And so we inserted that. And then we did something even more extraordinary in some ways, which is that we inserted language that said that no rules or regulations or statute can ever be issued by a state agency in Idaho which contradicts this legislation.
That's dramatic.
Yeah, those two things are really dramatic because all over the nation, if there's a disease outbreak, healthy, unvaccinated individuals can be excluded for weeks, if not months. So let's just say there's a measles outbreak that goes on for 2 months. Those children who are unvaccinated can be excluded even if they're healthy for all that time. And there are stories. I mean, it's true that high school kids who've been excluded have lost their scholarships for college, have lost their senior year of performing in their sports, and ultimately taken their own lives. So this is really important. And then the other piece about prohibiting any rules, regulations, or code that contradicts this, it means that even if the governor declares an emergency in the future, nothing can be enacted in order to implement it.
Wow. And so in the end, this modified bill, like you said, the new and improved version at the 11th hour, it was passed?
It was passed. Basically what happened was, and it was incredible because Governor DeSantis was here in Idaho so the Monday that the bill made it to the governor's desk at 11:30 in the morning, that morning at 8:30, the bill had already passed the previous Wednesday. That morning, Governor DeSantis was here in Idaho visiting the legislature because they were talking about a constitutional convention, to amend the Constitution, and it got voted down by the Idaho legislature, but he wanted to come anyway. I'm sure because he has aspirations of running for president again, but also because he wants to make these issues, I think, kind of mainstream issue. And so he's actually sitting there next to our governor as he's addressing the legislature, and he says, wow, Idaho's doing all these fantastic things. Congratulations on passing the Idaho Medical Freedom Act. And the governor's like, so he was sitting there stone-faced.
Yeah.
And then our attorney general came out at least twice on Twitter saying Idaho needs to pass the Medical Freedom Act. So there was so much pressure in support of it. And you have the, educational associations against it. But the other thing is that there was a Supreme Court case against the New Horizons daycare, which is one of the biggest daycare in Idaho and the nation. And that case was supposed to be heard in front of the Idaho Supreme Court on May 5th. And it revolved around a 2-year-old child that had been unenrolled from a New Horizons daycare because they said, well, the parent can exempt their child, but we're a private entity and we don't have to honor it. That had gone to the Supreme Court. And our case basically mooted the case, but that case was supposed to be heard on May 5th. And I think the governor was trying to have the legislature exclude daycares to give the nod to the Supreme Court to allow this to go forward, right? To say, private entities don't have to adhere to this. So it was insane what happened, Hilda. It was the most exciting thing. And I mean, it's a dream come true, right? It's something I've been working for over 20 years. And it is something that I think hopefully has broken the dam and helped people to understand, for us to reassert the truth, which is that we have the moral authority, that there is nothing moral about dictating what other people do with their bodies. It's been my message for a long time that we and we alone know our medical history. We and we alone know what's best for us. And we alone have to live with the consequences of our choices. How can you dispute that from a moral position? And I think that the whole legislature, the vast majority of them, heard that.
Yeah,
they agree with
powerful.
It. And they agree with it.
I just have a few more questions to ask you as we start to wrap up. One is, what do you say to the naysayers, Leslie, who say, I don't need legislation to back my own authority and my own autonomy. I'm just going to go off grid. And I think kind of fighting the powers that be is a losing game, a losing proposition. What would you say to them?
I think that that's all good and well if you actually can completely withdraw and you want to live that life. That's for you. But, I want to be part of the solution. And maybe, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen to our government and our system. I think that we are moving towards a breaking point. I do believe that. But in the meantime, I believe that we can actually change things in our local levels. I've been on several times in the last 5 years with you, and I've always said that globalism is the problem and localism is the solution. I totally applaud what Secretary Kennedy is doing and how he's trying to help us, but he can't save us on his own. What we can do, however, is to work in our localities, in our states and our local communities to push back. And I think that's what's so important. So I don't know, withdrawing just doesn't seem like a good option to me. I mean, how is that fixing anything?
Yeah. Well, and so some people might opt out, but others might do exactly what you're saying and lean into the idea that I want to be an activist. I want to get involved on a local level. Where should they begin so that other states, so their states, if they live in the U.S., will follow suit?
Yeah. So Health Freedom Defense Fund has created a model bill out of the legislation, and we are compiling a legislative packet to help people. It's going to get posted to the website so that they can go and replicate it in their own states. And so that's going to be posted to healthfreedomdefense.org in the not too distant future. I want to get some opinions on the bill as it's written, and we're trying to create videos on how to do this in your own state, how to testify, how to craft your own public comment, because so many people are afraid of doing that, and just, how to kind of organize yourselves. I am hoping that people will do it through their Weston Price chapters. I think that would be fantastic. I believe that Health Freedom Defense Fund is probably going to partner with Stand for Health Freedom and some other national organizations that are 501c4s who could actually lobby. And so they will take this. They've already got state chapters. They'll take this and move forward with it. Heritage Action wants to work on it and some other groups. And so this is going to be, I believe, a fantastic thing. What I hope happens is that the states that are most aligned with Idaho will be the first to implement this. And then it will start to kind of box out the other ones. Just like, essentially what happened to the governor was, it was the last day of the session. The session had been extended a week. We'd already called him out for basically being dishonest and fabricating this excuse that, we didn't prohibit schools, that we prohibited schools from sending sick kids home. And we're like, that's just not true. I literally openly called him dishonest. And I said, we'll see if he's an honorable man or not. I think they just had to do it because they had lost the moral authority. And I think that's what can happen on a national level as well, as more and more states do this. If we think about all these things that happen in the world, like Roger Bannister, he's the man who broke the 4-minute mile. Mm-hmm. And it was considered impossible until he did it. Mm-hmm. It was inconceivable. Or I think about, there was this guy named Shaun White, the Flying Tomato. He's this amazing snowboarder, right? And he did like a quadruple flip or something on a snowboard. People didn't even think you could do anything like what he started doing. And then it broke the kind of psychological barrier. And that's what I think the Idaho Medical Freedom Act has done. And I hope that we get one more and boom, we're off. So that's where I'm super excited about it. And, people have to make their own choice about what works for them. But I just feel like we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to start really seriously restructuring society in a very, very positive way. And I want to be part of that. So
yes, this is a very special moment in time in history. And you are making it. Leslie, we applaud you here at the Weston A. Price Foundation. We are all about medical autonomy. We want people to have informed consent for any medical intervention or even preventative treatment they might get. So we think this is wonderful. And now as we wrap up, I want to pose to you the question I love to pose at the end of each podcast. If the listener could only do one thing to improve their own health, what would you recommend that they do?
To improve their health, I think one of the things that has had the biggest impact on me is just to make sure that I get outside every day and get some sunlight. It makes you feel so good. Last week I was at a big MAHA event in DC, and I was in the downstairs of this big hotel from literally for like 12 hours or something. And I felt so awful until I came out at 7:00 at night and just saw the sky. Yes. Get outside, see light, get the sun on your face every day. don't you feel good when you get sunlight on you?
100%. That is wonderful. Leslie, on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thank you for your time today. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you so much, Hilda.
Our guest today was Leslie Manookian. Visit her website, healthfreedomdefense.org, to learn more. And I'm Hilda Labrada-Gore, the host and producer of this podcast on behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. And for the transcript for this week's episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a recent review from Apple Podcasts. It was entitled Sampler Podcast by Susie Q, No Excuses. She said, "Keep up the good work. I appreciate all the info you put out." Susie Q, it is our pleasure. Thank you so much for listening and for leaving us a review. You too can leave us a review. Go to Apple Podcasts, click on ratings and reviews, give us a bunch of stars, and tell people why they should listen to the show. And thank you once again for listening. Stay well, my friend. And remember to keep your feet on the ground and your face to the sun.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.